This conference will now be recorded.
Right, so yesterday we have seen how to pass normal data types and internal tables as parameters to what? Subroutines. Now, so when we are passing parameters to subroutines, there are two ways of passing. One is pass by reference, another is pass by value. I repeat, we can pass parameters to subroutines in two ways. One is pass by reference and pass by value. Let us quickly understand the difference between pass by reference and pass by value. I'll take an example here. So just observe, very simple example, a general example that we know in every programming language. So I'll just create the program. Parameters to subroutines by reference versus value. So type of program is executable program. Let us save it in the local object. Yeah, right. So I'll declare some two variables here. Data v underscore x type I. I'll give some default value. I'll give it as something value 10. V underscore y type I. I'll give the value as 5. Let us print these values, right? So assume this is passed by reference. Okay, so I'll print the x and y value, right? V underscore x and v underscore y values before calling subroutine. I'll print what? V underscore x and v underscore y. So when I execute this, F8, yes. So what are the current values I got? X has something 20, 10 and y is what? 5. Okay, x value is 10, y value is 5. So nothing much to discuss here. Done. Now I'll try to call one subroutine. So I'll say perform. I'll give a subroutine name as something sub1. Okay, so how do you pass? I want to pass this two integers as parameters to subroutine. So whenever you want to pass the predefined data types as parameters, what is the keyword we use? Using, I'll pass those parameters v underscore x and v underscore y. Am I clear? So I'm calling the subroutine. I'm passing that x and y as parameters. Let us define the subroutine. So I'll say form sub1. What is the signature of my subroutine call? We are passing two actual parameters. Yesterday we have seen what are the parameters we specify at the time of calling the subroutine. They are called as what? Actual parameters. They are called as actual parameters. Now let me define two formal parameters. Since we have two actual parameters, I have to take two formal parameters. I'll take something using m and what? N. Done. So assume like this. So this is okay. I'll put it like this. This is passed by reference. This is passed by value. Passed by reference and passed by value. So here I declared what two variables. So this is v underscore x and this is v underscore y. V underscore x and what is the other variable? V underscore y. Right. So what are the current values of this x and y? X value is something 10, y value is something what? 5. I used some write statement. So in the output screen, I'll get the result as what? 10 and what? 5. We are printing X value and what? Y value. So initially they are 10 and 5. I'll get that values. Now I'm calling the subroutine by passing these two integers as parameters. We have received that in what? Formal parameters M and N. By default, parameters are passed by reference. By default, parameters are passed by reference. So this is your formal parameter M. This is formal parameter N. Okay, so these are my what? Formal parameter M and N. This is M. Okay, and this is N. M and N. Okay. So what is the concept of pass by references? The concept of pass by references, the addresses of actual parameters are copied to formal parameters. So every variable in the memory will have some address location. We cannot see that address location here. In case of C language, we have the support of pointers. There we can refer to the address also. But here ABAP doesn't have explicit support for pointers. But here also assume that every variable will be stored in some address location. So assume X address is 100, Y address is something 200. It is only an assumption. We cannot see that address locations. Okay, done. So what is that we are trying to discuss? By default, parameters are passed by what? Reference. Passed by reference is what? The addresses of actual parameters are copied to what? Formal parameters. So what happens here? The address of X is 100, address of Y is 200. These addresses are copied to what? Formal parameters. Means M will point to address location 100. Okay, and N will point to the address location of Y. So why I am representing like this? Because by default parameters are passed by reference. Reference means addresses are passed as values internally. Means formal parameters refers to the addresses of our actual parameters. Okay, so keep this in mind. So M is pointing to X, N is pointing to what? Y. Now what is my agenda here? Inside this subroutine, I want to swap, I want to interchange my formal parameters. So for interchanging these formal parameters, I'll take one local variable. Let me give a variable name as something lv underscore z type what I. So I declared one local variable lv underscore z. So assume this is your lv underscore z, lv underscore z. What is the default value for integer? 0. Okay, default value for integer is 0. So I'll use this particular local variable to interchange the values. So I'll write some logic here. So I've written some logic to interchange my what? Formal parameters. So I repeat once again. Initial value of x is 10, y is 5. When I'm printing this, when this write statement gets executed, we are printing the x value, y value. What are the current values of x and y? 10 and 5. I would get the values as I would get the result as what? 10 and 5. Now I'm calling the subroutine. By default, the addresses of actual parameters will be copied to what? Form copied in the sense, understand like formal parameter will point to what? Actual parameter. So M will point to X, Y will point to N. Inside my subroutine definition, I took one local variable Z. What is the logic I wrote here? M value, we are trying to assign to what? Z. M value, we are trying to assign to what? Z. If you see this M here, M is pointing to address location 100. Na? M is pointing to the address location 100. So what is the value stored at address location 100? 10. So this 10 should be assigned to my local variable what z. So z as of now contains 0. So this 0 would be overwritten with the initialized value what 10. Understood? So why 10? Because I'm assigning what? M inside what? Z. I'm assigning M inside Z. M is pointing to what? Address location 100. What is the value stored at address location 100? 10 only. The 10 will be assigned to Z. Done. Next, N we are trying to assign to what? M. N we are trying to assign to M. N is pointing to what? N is pointing to the address location 200. What is the value at address location 200? 5. This 5 should be assigned to what? M. Na? 5 should be assigned to what? M. M is pointing to this address location 100. Na? So what happens here? Since M is pointing to X, this X value will be changed to what? 5. So according to our logic, we are trying to change M value, but it is actually changing what? X value, because M is pointing to what? X. Any changes you try to do to M will reflect what? X. Any changes that you try to do to N will reflect what? Y. Done. Next, what is the next logic I wrote here? So N is assigned to what? M. Z we are trying to assign to N. Is Z is pointing to anything? No. So Z is having what? 10. This 10, this 10 should be assigned to what? N. 10 should be assigned to N. N is pointing to Y. Na? So this Y value will be changed to what? How much? 10. So my subroutine is executed. So what is the logic we are trying to do, implement in subroutine? We are trying to swap formal parameters, but it is actually swapping what? Actual parameters. So once a subroutine execution is finished, control comes to the next statement. Na? So after perform, again I'll try to print x and y value. For your understanding, I'll give the statement as x and y values after calling what? After calling subroutine. Again I'm printing x and y. What are the current values of x and y here? Current values of x and y is how much? 5 and 10. Na? Initially it was 10 and 5. Now it is what? 5 and 10. Okay, so when I execute this, let me activate. When I execute, what I got? Initially it is 10 and 5. After calling the subroutine is what? 5 and 10. So this is the concept of what? Pass by reference. Let me complete pass by value. Then if any questions you can ask me. So what is the concept of pass by reference? By default, parameters are passed by reference. Reference means what? Address means the addresses of actual parameters are referred by whom? By formal parameters. Any changes you try to do to the formal parameters inside the subroutine will actually reflect the corresponding actual parameter. That's why initially x and y value is 10 and 5. Now I got what? 5 and 10. Now I got 5 and 10. Now let me go for what? Pass by value. So what I'll do now again, okay, let me set a different color. Yeah. Again, I'll set back the x value to 10. I'll set back the y value to what? Something 5. Okay. Once again, let me print. This is passed by what value? X and y value before calling the subroutine. Again, I'm printing x and y value. What are the current values of x and y now? 10 and 5. Na? So when I execute, yes, once again I got x value as 10, y value as what? 5. Working fine. Right? So x value is 10, y value is what? 5. So let me call another subroutine. So here I'll say perform sub2 using, I'll pass again x and y value using v underscore x and v underscore y. I have to define this subroutine. So let me write similar logic. I'll define another subroutine. I'll copy it, sub2. I'll take the formal parameter same m and n. If I leave it like this, again this becomes pass by reference. But this time I don't want to pass by reference. Reference means address. I want to pass it by value. So how do we differentiate means? While specifying the formal parameters, use addition what? Value. Value of m, and this is what? Value of what? N. So we are instructing SAP to receive the value, not the addresses. So again the same story here. So assume this is x and y. Okay, assume this is x and y value. What is this? V underscore x, and this is v under. Am I recording the session? Yeah, fine. So x value is 10, y value is how much? 5. X value is 10, y value is 5. We are printing that result, na? So output at this stage is what? 10 and 5. Done. Now we are calling the subroutine by passing these two parameters. So this is formal parameter m. This is formal parameter n. M and what? N. M and N. Okay. So here observe this carefully. While calling this subroutine sub2, we are passing what? X and Y. When I'm defining, we are clearly using the keyword what? Value. We are telling SAP receive the value, not the address. Okay. So what is the value of X here? 10. Value of X is 10. The 10 will be copied to what? M. And what is the value of N? Y? 5. That Y 5 is copied to what? N. Understood? So now M is not pointing to X, N is not pointing to Y because we are not receiving the address. Na? So M doesn't know the address of X, N doesn't know the address of Y because we are clearly instructing to receive the value. If I don't use the value, you assume that it will receive the address, means it will point to the address. Now the same story. I declare another local variable Z here. So this is Z here. Initial value of int here is what? 0. Now what is the logic we wrote inside the subroutine? M value we are trying to assign to Z. What is there in M? 10 only, na? And M is not pointing to anything. So this 10 will be assigned to what? Z. So this 0 would be overwritten with what? How much? 10. Okay, done. Next, what else? N value we are assigning it to M. N value. What is there inside N? 5. Again, N is not pointing to anything, remember. So this 5 should be assigned to what? M. M is not pointing to anything. So what happened now? It will swap this formal parameter. Earlier, what is happening? It is swapping what? Actual parameter. So this becomes how much now? 5. Done. Then what? Z value we are trying to assign to N. What is there inside Z? How much? 10 we are trying to assign it to what? N. So this 5 would be overwritten with how much? 10. N is also not pointing to anything. So this becomes what? 10. Right? So it is actually swapping what? Formal parameter. So this execution is completed. Again, I'll come back here. I'll try to print x and y value again. X and y value after calling what? Subroutine. Once again, I am printing x and y value. What are the values of x and y in the memory? 10 and 5 only, na? So before calling also I got 10 and 5. After calling also I'll get what? 10 and 5. So when I execute, what I got? Before calling also 10 5. After calling also 10 5. This is the difference between pass by reference and pass by value. If you want any automatic reflection, you'll go for pass by reference. If you don't want that, means when you change the formal parameters, I don't want any reflection in my actual parameter. So I'll go for pass by value. How do you pass parameters by value? as part of formal parameters, we have to use a keyword. We have to use addition called as what value, so that it will receive only the value, so that formal parameters will not refer to the address of the actual parameters. Any changes you try to make to the formal parameters will not reflect the actual parameters. That's all. This is a concept between reference and value. Okay. Now next we have what another modulation technique called as include programs. It's a very small concept. Let's see this include programs. Right. So you can compare this include program similar to including header files in C language. Okay, importing packages in Java, importing namespaces in .NET. Okay, so if you take our C language or C++, almost in every program, we'll use some predefined functions like printf, scanf. So those printf and scanf are the standard functions which are available in the header file. So if you know C language, you'll say what hash include stdio.h. Okay, you'll include all the header files. These header files contains what all the predefined functions, include conio.h, like that, blah blah blah. If you take Java, in Java we have to import the packages. You'll say something import java.io.star, import uh, import java.awt.star. Okay, import swings, like that. We'll import the package. Similar to this, we have the concept of what include programs. So what is an include program? It's an include program, I can say it is a container of, include program is a container of global variable declarations, subroutine definitions, and module definitions. I repeat, include program is a collection of global variable declarations, subroutine definitions, and module definitions. We know what is the meaning of subroutine definition. We don't know what is module definition. That will come in future topic when we discuss module programming. But as of now, you can understand an include program can contain, I'm saying can contain, I'm not saying must contain. An include program might contain all these three things. An include program might contain either of these things. So an include program can contain global variable declarations, subroutine definitions, and module definitions. So it is something like this here. The advantage of include program is something like this. See this. So what you'll do, you'll create an include program. In that include program, I can declare what? Global variables. I can declare subroutines. I can define what? Modules. So once an include program is available, I can reuse, I can include it in what? Any other repository objects. I can include it in other executable programs. I can include in other include programs. I can include in other module programs. So something like this. How do we include? In case of C language, we'll say hash include. In Java, we use import. Here we have to use the keyword include. I can include this include program in any number of executable programs, in any number of module programs, in another include program also. I can include. I can also include in what? Subroutine pools. So it increases what? Reusability. So when do we go for include program? Means in a project, okay, you'll have the team members. So every team member is responsible for what? Developing different types of objects. So as part of those objects development, okay, in multiple objects, I require same variables. I require same internal tables. I require same work areas. I require same subroutines. Instead of declaring in each and every object separately, I can create it centrally as part of what? Include program. And whichever program is interested, whichever object is interested in using the components of that include program, we can include in that particular program by using what? Include statement. right? So let's see how to create the include program and how to include this particular include program in other repository objects. Yeah. So where do we create this? So far, if you have remembered, we have created two types of repository objects. One is executable program, and somewhere a couple of days back, last week, we have created the subroutine pool for storing what? External subroutines. If you go for executable programs, it starts with report keyword. If you go for subroutine pool, we have seen it starts with program keyword. Now my agenda is I want to create an include program and I want to declare some variables as part of that include program. So I'll go to ABAP editor, SC38. I'll give the name of the include as something Z830. Okay, INC1. Some name, whatever you want. I'll give it as Z830 INC1 create. I'll say include with what? Global variable declarations. Include with the global variable declarations. Type of program, so far we have chosen executable program and subroutine pool. Now I'll go for what? Include program. Type of program is include program. See, in the project, no one will tell us whether to go for include program or not to go for include program. The team, the developer has to take the call. If you feel that same variables has to be used in multiple areas, instead of declaring them in every program separately, declare them globally as part of an include program and include that include program wherever you want. So I'll choose the type of program that include program. So include programs doesn't start with any keyword. It creates a blank program. So I'll save it. I'll save it in the local object. Done. It has created the blank. It doesn't start with any keyword. So what is that I want inside this include program? I want to declare some variables. So I'll declare some variables, data, something. Okay, I'll give a variable name as something gv underscore x type I. Okay, I'll say gv underscore y type I. I'll declare another variable gv underscore res type I. I'll create one types structure. Whatever you want, you declare. Okay, employee number type I. Employee name of 20 type C. I'll close a types declaration. Based on this types declaration, I can create what? Internal tables and work areas. So also type table of ty underscore emp, w underscore emp type ty underscore emp. So save it, check for the syntax, no errors, activate. Then it is active. I'll try to execute. I'll say F8. I can execute only if it is an executable program, but this is an include program. So when I execute, I got the message on the status bar. What is that? Operation terminated. I cannot execute the include programs. I cannot execute the include programs. It has to be included in other repository object. So as of now, my include program contains some what? Three integer variable declarations, one type structure, one internal table, and work area. Done. That's all. Okay. Now what I'll do? I'll create one executable program, Z830 program. 36 create, including include program containing what? Global variables. Type of program, what is that now? Executable program. Make clear the type of program is executable program. I'll save it in the local object. Done. Okay. So here what I'll do is, okay, right. Okay. So here, okay, right. So suppose here I'll say write something, begin of what? Executable program. I'll say write end of what? Something executable program. Some statement I'll give. So when I execute this, when I save, activate, execute, I'll get that statement. Nothing to discuss here. Now, here what I'll do, I'll try to use that variable gv underscore x equal to something 45, gv underscore y equal to something 32. I'll say gv underscore res is equal to gv underscore x plus gv underscore y. I'll say right sum is what? gv underscore res. Okay. So we know when we do the syntax check now, I'll get an error. Na? What is that error I'll get? Field gv underscore x is unknown. I'm trying to use a variable without declaring it. So when I do syntax check, I'm getting an error. Field gv underscore x is unknown. It is neither in one of the specified tables nor defined by what? Data statement. Okay. So what I can do now, I can declare it, but already these variables are available in one of my include program. Na? So I'll try to include. So where to include? It is always recommended. It is always recommended to include the include programs at the beginning itself. So here I'll say, or it is always recommended to include the programs, to include the include programs at the beginning. But what I'll do wantedly is, I will not include it at the beginning. I'll include it as a second statement. How do I include? Include, what is that include name which we created just now? Z830 INC1. Okay, so what this statement will do? This statement internally includes all the components of this include program in the current program. Am I clear? What this include statement will do? Internally, it includes all the components of this include program in the current program. Okay. So when I do syntax check now, I don't have any errors. Fine. Execute this. Yes, I got the output. Begin of executable program. Sum is 77. End of end. So what is that point we understood here? I have to include the include program. I have to include the include program before we start using the components of that include program. Suppose I'll remove it from here. I'll keep it here. Obviously, it'll give an error. Na? Without including only, I'm trying to use X. So again, you'll get the same story. X is unknown. So what is the suggestion? Include the include program before you start including. Actually, the recommendation is include it here on the top. But wantedly, I'm not including there. I'm including it as the second statement. But before I started using the components of the include program, I'm not having any issues. Working fine. Working fine. Right? So if I double click on this include program, if I double click on this include program, it takes the control to that particular include program. Okay, it has taken the control to that particular include program. I can come back. Right. So as of now, my included program contains only what? Variable declarations. Okay, the include program contains only variable declarations. But a include program can contain what? Variable declarations, subroutine definitions, as well as what? Module definitions, as well as module definitions. Okay. 1 second, please. Yeah, what I'll do now is I will create one more include program. I'll create one more include program which contains both variable declarations as well as what? Subroutine definitions. Okay, done. So I'll go back. I'll create one more include program. Since it is a custom include, obviously we have to start with Z or Y. So I'll say Z830 INC2. Some name I'll give Z830 INC2. Create. Yeah, include with what? Global variables. Some meaningful title I am giving. Include with global variables and what? Subroutines. Okay, type of program is what? Include program. Type of program is include program. So as part of this, I will include some global variable. I'll declare some global variable, something gv underscore x type I, gv underscore y type I. I'll declare another variable gv underscore res type I, and I'll also define some subroutines. Okay. What is that? Sum is what? gv underscore res. End for form is what? End form. Let me define form sub to gv underscore x something. Some logic I'm writing. Differences on. So what is the change now? My include program contains both what? Variable declarations, as well as what? Subroutine definitions. It can also contain module definitions, but at this stage, we don't know what is module because we don't know about module programs. I'm not discussing that. Going forward during the course, when we get into dialog programming, module programming, we'll see this module definitions. Done. Save it, check for the syntax, activate. Done, it is successfully activated. Okay. Now what I'll do, I'll try to use this include in the executable program, Z830 program. What shall I give? 37. Include programs, including programs containing what? Global variables and what? Subroutines. Type of program is what? Executable program. Done. I'll save it now. So here I'll say write begin of what? Executable program. Okay, and I'll say end of what? Executable program. Some statements I'm giving. Okay, so when I execute, yeah, I got the result. Now what I'll do is observe this carefully. I'll say perform sub one. Perform sub one. So will I get any error now? So when I do the syntax check, I am getting an error. Form sub one does not. It will check for this subroutine definition within the same program. Now what I want is, okay, now what I want is I want to invoke the subroutine which is defined in my include program. What is my include program? inc2 now, right? So I have to tell SAP, I have to instruct SAP to check for that subroutine also in the what? Include program. How do I do that? I have to include now. So where I'll include now? Hmm? Where I'll include it here, or I'll include it here, somewhere here. I'll say include. What is the include name? Z830 INC2. Z830 INC2. Right? So what I told in the earlier example, I can include, it is recommended to include the include programs at the beginning. It is recommended to include the include programs at the beginning. Okay, done. So save it. When I do syntax check, okay, before I do the syntax check here, I'll go back. I'll go back to my previous program where I included it here and before I started using. I can also include it at the beginning. Recommendation is what? Always include at the beginning. So when I do syntax check here, no errors. When I execute, I got the result. Okay. Now, keeping this in mind, I'll try to include the second include at the beginning. I have done the same thing. So when I'm calling the subroutine, SAP will check the existence of this subroutine within the same program as well as in the included program. Right? It is there in the include program. Now, if I double click on this 830 INC2, yes, it contains what? Subroutine sub1. So let's see what happens. Save it, check for the syntax error. I got an error statement not accessible. Can anyone suggest me the solution? Why I got this error? Why I didn't got this error in the previous case? Anyone? In the previous case also, I included the include program at the beginning. It was working fine. Now also I done the same thing, but I got this error. Why we are getting the error? Anyone?
Sir,
Yeah, Rohit.
sir, in include program we declare first time in variable, so that's why this error is coming.
No, in the earlier program also the same thing. No? In the earlier program also, this include program contains variable declarations at the first.
But for the sub from calling in that variable declaration is not allowed, so that's why this error is coming.
No, no. See, the reason is, yeah, let me explain. The reason is we are trying to include this include program. I repeat, we are trying to include this include program in the current program. What this include has to do, it has to include all the components. It has to include all the components of this include program in the current program. What are the components available in this include program? It contains some variable declarations, it contains some subroutine definitions. All these are, I'm calling it as what? Components. Okay, all these components gets included internally at the beginning. Am I clear? What this include will do internally is it will include all the components of this include program in the current program. So this include contains some subroutine definitions also. Na? Sub 1 and sub 2 will be included here. Where it gets included at the beginning only. Na? It is included at the beginning. But we have seen so far in the last few sessions, subroutines where we have to define, subroutines where we have to define at the end of the program. But here, when you are including this include program here, those subroutine gets included at the beginning internally. You cannot say I cannot see. Assumption is what? Those subroutines gets included internally at the beginning of the program. So if it is included at the beginning of the program, it is unable to understand from where it has to start the execution. That's why I got an error. Statement not accessible. It is giving there in the fourth line, because before that we have the include which contains what? Some subroutine definition. So what I'll do to avoid this error, I'll remove this from here. I'll keep it at the end. I'll keep it at the end so that what happens? What happens? The include the subroutines of these include programs gets included at the end. Save it, check for the syntax. We are happy. It's still compiling. Okay, activate this. Okay, when I execute, good, we got the result. Begin of execute program, sum is 34, so on. So understood. If I put the breakpoint here, observe this. If I put the breakpoint, I gave the breakpoint in the 37th program, which is the executable program. Execute, right? So where is the control now? In what? 37th program, perform what? Sub 1. By default, what is the event here? By default, start of selection. Internally, you'll have the event called a start of selection. Now I'm calling this subroutine. Where is the definition of this subroutine? In the include program. So let's see whether the control is jump to the include program or not. I'll say F5. Yes, it is going to what? To the include program. it is trying to execute this subroutine. It might execute. Okay, it is coming back to the calling program. That's it. F8 working fine. So we are happy. Understood? So to avoid that error, I'm including that include program at the end so that internally the subroutine gets executed, sorry, gets included at the end. Now what I'll do is somewhere here I'll say, okay, or somewhere here I'll say gv underscore x is equal to something 50 or 40. I'll say gv underscore y equal to something 30. Am I clear? I'm using that x and y. Okay, save it. Check for the syntax. What is the error I got? X is unknown because we are including that include program at the end. Na? So before including only I have started using the components. So that is the reason. Recommendation is what? To include the include programs always at the beginning. Always at the beginning. But what is the issue I'm getting here? It is unable to understand from where it has to start the execution. Statement not accessible. Because internally that subroutine gets included at the beginning itself. So SAP is unable to understand from where it has to start the what? Execution. So what I'll do now is, it is always recommended to include the include program at the beginning. We have included, and after including, what I will do is I will instruct SAP to start the execution of the program from a certain point. So I'll indicate that by using what? Start of selection. Okay, now see, save it, check for the syntax, no errors, done, execute this. What is that I got? Sum is what? 34. Okay, like this I can do it. So I'll just call the subroutine 2, save it, check for the syntax, activate, execute. What I got? 40 minus 30. I've changed the global variable values. X I have set it to 40, y value is to what? 10. 40 minus 30 is what? 10. So what is the meaning here? It is always recommended to include the include program at the beginning itself. But if the include program contains any block definitions in the form of subroutines or in the form of module definitions, you'll get a syntax error saying that statement not accessible, which means what? SAP is unable to understand from where it has to start the program execution. So in that cases, it is recommended to include the beginning, and after including, you tell SAP to start the execution from this point. So after this, you give start of selection. If I don't give start of selection here, from here it is considered start of selection. That's the reason use start of selection event explicitly after what? Include program. Understood? This is the adjustment you have to do it. In the previous program also, if you go back to the previous program, in the previous program, am I using any start of selection? Even though I'm including at the beginning, I'm not using start of selection because this included program doesn't have any block definitions. It doesn't have any block definition, so it is working. But practice is whether that include contains block definitions or doesn't contain. Here also use what? Start of selection, doesn't matter. Okay, so what is the thumb rule? Always include the include programs at the beginning itself, and then after including, explicitly handle the event what? Start of selection, indicating SAP to start the program execution from that particular point. Okay, so in the earlier case also we can use start of selection, no issues. So this is how we will create what? Include programs, and I can include any number of include programs. Can I include that 830 INC1 also here? Suppose I'll say Z830 INC1. Understood? So since I'm including two include programs, I'm using the chain operator. If you don't want to use this chain operator with comma separator, use separate include statements. Will I get any error now? Anyone? Will I get any error now? Anyone? I'm including both the include programs. Will I get any error? Yes, we should get an error because both the includes are having the same variable declarations, na? X and Y, res. They are declared in what? Both the include programs. A program cannot contain two variable declarations with the same name. Na? So obviously I may get an error. Save it, check for the syntax. I am getting an error. gv underscore x has already been declared. So why I am getting this error? Because both the includes are having what? Same variable declarations. But if you have different variables, you can include what? Any number of include programs like this. That's it. This is a small concept related to what? Include programs. So in the projects, what happens is when you're developing the objects, you'll be an ABAP consultant will develop what? N number of objects. So throughout the project, you will have multiple ABAP consultants who are involved in what developing different types of what objects depending on the requirement. As part of those multiple objects development, we may require to use the same variables, same internal tables, same work areas, instead of declaring them separately in each and every object to increase the reusability, to decrease the maintenance cost. You declare that common variables in a include program and use that include program wherever you want. That's all. Okay, this is about the include programs. Right, so we are done with subroutines and include programs. Tomorrow we'll start with what? Function modules, which is very important. All are important, but again, this function modules also we'll be using almost in every scenario. Okay, so the base for function modules is this include programs, subroutines, pass by reference, pass by value, using keyword, changing keyword, tables keyword, whatever we discussed in the last few sessions. Even for function modules also we'll pass internal tables as parameters. So all those things we'll discuss in the next couple of sessions. We may require 2 sessions for understanding that function model concept. So we'll start it from tomorrow. Right, I'm done for today. Any questions, please ask. Chalo then. So thank you everyone. We'll meet tomorrow.